and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast from Agriland that keeps you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Louise Hickey and I'm joined today by journalist Aisling O'Brien. It was a busy week with updates from the ongoing knackeries and rendering plant disputes, some changes with milk prices, and a new IFA President was elected. We also provided an explainer this week on the issue for unregistered farmers who are not receiving VAT refunds. There seems to be a misconception that there has been changes in the legislation made by Revenue, but that's not the case. Aisling, I know it's quite hard to comprehend, but could you try to explain a little bit about what's actually going on?
Yes, so Louise, we've got reports in from farm organisations and industry representatives as well about how this issue has impacted both on farmers and with different merchants as well, whether it might come to maybe people who are manufacturing milking equipment or different things like that. We're hearing that farmers obviously would have taken the VAT refund into their calculations when making capital expenditures and improvements on their farms. And now it seems that some of them might not be able to avail of that. And the result of that then is that they are contacting the people that they placed the orders with to cancel these orders, which of course then has a knock-on effect for agri-businesses around the country as well. But we'll come back to that in maybe a little bit. As you said, a very interesting explainer this week that we had on Agriland, and a lot of farmers very, very interested in what is going on here. So Revenue has stated that it has not changed its approach to the refund order. And it highlighted that each VAT claim that's made by a farmer is assessed on its own merits. They said that unregistered farmers may be able to avail of a VAT refund on certain expenses allowed under the VAT refund order. Now, that order allows for refunds to be claimed on unavoidable expenses on the construction, extension, alteration, or reconstruction of farm buildings or structures. So that would include maybe the likes of fencing, draining of farmland, construction, and different things like that. Now, Revenue have confirmed to us that the refund order does not provide relief from VAT on the purchase of movable goods such as farm machinery. So there is, as you said, a level of confusion out there. And we spoke with the IFA Farm Business Executive, Carl Kassan, this week from my own fair county of Kerry. And he explained that the legislation hasn't necessarily changed, but what seems to have changed is Revenue's interpretation of it. And this is where this grey area seems to have emerged. Now, Revenue would probably say it's black and white, but there has been a change, and we are seeing a change in how farmers' VAT refunds are being dealt with. And he said in the last 2 to 3 months, Revenue has taken maybe a more literal meaning of the legislation. And there hasn't been any changes, when it comes to legislation, or the government aren't involved here. I know people love to blame the government, but it seems to be Revenue's interpretation of it. So I suppose, look, where does it all boil down to now? It looks like, we have farmers in this situation where they want to make investments on their farm, but this is obviously quite off-putting. And we had a number of statements this week calling on the Minister for Finance, Michael McGrath, to get involved here. I'm not sure what he can do, or can he sit down with Revenue? Revenue, will obviously have to maybe meet up with farm organisations to discuss this a little bit more, because there is a level of confusion. MOCRA issued a statement and they said, this will be particularly hard on young farmers because the access to capital and credit is a particular stumbling block when it comes to their business plans. So not being able to avail of a VAT refund would be an issue. And we heard from Milk Quality Ireland as well. That's a consortium of a number of different groups, including Teagasc and milk manufacturing companies and ICOS and dairy cooperatives. And they warned against this going ahead, and this interpretation being the status quo going forward because of the impact it will have on industry. And they felt that, will hurt our ability to be more sustainable, particularly in the dairy sector. And that was echoed as well by AgTech Ireland. Their chief executive this week, Padraig Hennessy, said that this will result in job losses across the agribusiness sector, but also maybe stifle our improvements or environmental improvements on farm as well. So look, we'll have to see where it goes from here. There are calls for government to get involved, and we'll have to see, will those be heeded?
Yes, Aisling, and Revenue was also arranging to meet with some farm organisations this week, which Agriland will definitely be providing some updates from. Now, another major story we've been following up on for about 2 weeks now is the ongoing dispute between rendering plants and knackery owners. Agriland received reports of animals piling up on farms with knackeries continuing to strike. The Department of Agriculture have offered some advice to these farmers. Aisling, what are they being told to do?
Yes, Louise, that's true. I mean, it is a very, very serious situation on farms out there at the moment, and for knackery plants as well. This, I suppose, standoff within the sector, and there has been numerous calls from politicians and farm organisations for the Department of Agriculture and for Minister Charlie McConalogue to get involved here and to sort out this issue. So we caught up with Minister McConalogue this week, and he basically said that the first port of call for farmers with fallen animals in their yard should be to contact their local knackery, their animal collection service, who can take them to Northern Ireland to be rendered. He said that there was recent engagement between the Department of Agriculture and the Irish Category 1 Renderers Association, where the department offered an increase in the subsidy paid for the benefit of farmers towards the rendering cost of fallen animals. And he said that he's removed a travel distance restriction. There used to be a restriction there of 125 kilometres in place for transporting animals. So this has been eased now, and that means that these animals can be brought to the north. The minister told us that he is closely monitoring this situation, and he did acknowledge that it has gone into a much more difficult situation because it has gone on for a week and a half now. And he felt that it is, though, a dispute between the renderers and the knackeries, and that it was something that, you know, he would be engaging with both sides to see if they could find a way forward. But he did feel, you know, that this is something that the industry has to resolve as well itself. So I suppose for maybe farmers down the end of the country, the southern end of the country, you know, maybe transporting animals, and for knackery companies as well, it might not be feasible for them to be bringing a lorry of fallen animals over the border to the north. So in some circumstances as well, the department will consider applications for burial certificates. So that would allow farmers to bury the animals on their land. But I suppose very important to note that, you know, we that would obviously come with terms and conditions, Louise. It's not the normal practice out there, and it's something that farmers wouldn't have done for a very, very long time. So that's something to proceed with caution, and to make sure that you're doing everything by the letter of the law as well. But look, here is some of what Minister Charlie McConalogue had to say to Agriland when we brought this issue up to him this week.
This is a dispute between the renderers and the animal collectors, and it's a dispute in relation to the prices being charged there. I've had my team engaging with all of them to see if we can find a way forward and find to help to resolve it, but it hasn't been resolved yet. But what we have done, and what I have done is previously there had been a 125 kilometre restriction, travel distance involved, within which rendered animals or animals for rendering could travel. So I have removed that so that animals from anywhere now, for example, can go into Northern Ireland, and renderers in Northern Ireland are accepting animals. So that is an option available at the moment, and while this dispute is underway, and many animals are going into the north. The other thing which I'm making clear as well is that in case, and that should be the first port of call for farmers who have a fallen animal to contact their animal collector, who does have that outlet in Northern Ireland, to be able to actually get it rendered while this dispute is ongoing. But the other thing then, for farmers who maybe are not, if they're not in a position to get an animal collector to collect it, it is going to be possible now to provide authorisation for it to be buried on farm. And that's something that farmers can contact their local department office in relation to, and then get the appropriate authorisation to be able to bury on farm if they don't have any other option. And in the meantime, I'm working, and my team will continue to work to try and be helpful to reach a resolution to this dispute.
Look, as we heard there, Louise, the minister said his team in the department is continuing to work with all sides involved here to get a solution to this issue, because it is very serious. And as you rightly said at the start, we cannot have a situation where dead animals are piling up either in farmyards or in knackeries, and it has to be resolved sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. Thanks, Aisling. I will be providing a lot more updates on that as the dispute continues. Now, just moving on from that, we have received some changes in the milk price this week, putting an end to an ongoing stabilising trend. What are we seeing, Aisling?
Bit of a mixed picture, Louise, because we have seen kind of stable milk prices for recent months following significant falls in milk checks in the preceding months. Lakeland Dairies was first out with their November milk price, and they're offering a base price of 36 cents a litre to be paid in the Republic of Ireland. That means that their base price has increased by 2 cents a litre when compared to October, and qualifying farmers will also receive a 3 cent a litre out of season payment. In the north, the base price will be 29.25 pence per litre, and there will be that base price is also increased by 2 pence a litre as well, and there will be an out of season payment for those farmers north of the border of 3 pence a litre. Now, Lakeland issued a statement, as they normally do, having a look at the global dairy markets, and they said that global supply and demand, it remains delicately poised out there as we come out of peak production in New Zealand and move halfway through the key dairy buying period. But overall, they said that the key signals are showing positivity, but they will continue to monitor the markets very closely as always. Now, Dairygold has followed suit. They've also increased their base milk price for suppliers by 2 cents a litre for November. The processor has increased their price to 35.5 cents a litre, and that's inclusive of sustainability and quality bonuses and VAT. Now, Kerry Group seems to be the only outlier at this time, Louise. Obviously, we're waiting for more processors at this stage to indicate their November prices. But Kerry Group has said that they will pay 35 cents a litre, inclusive of VAT. And that price has actually remained unchanged now since August. And in a statement from Kerry Group, they said that sentiment in regard to dairy commodities remains tentatively positive for 2024 as a turbulent 2023 comes to a close. That's for sure. I'm sure many dairy farmers would agree with that sentiment. And they said that the questions around the robustness of the market underpinning that positivity still remains. And, you know, there is uncertainty still out there, according to Kerry Group. So they've left their base price unchanged, but increases for Lakeland and Dairygold base prices. But as I said, more to come yet, and stay tuned to Agriland for all of the latest November prices.
Thanks for that update, Aisling. And it was an exciting week this week with the IFA elections coming to an end. After a long time campaigning, what's the latest there, Aisling?
Well, after all of the miles travelled, the hustings contested, the phone calls, the texts, maybe the babies kissed, the hands shaken, the shows attended, meetings attended as well by all of the candidates, it all came down to the count on Tuesday in the Castleknock Hotel in Dublin, Louise. And we'd initially heard that this count could have run into Wednesday and possibly beyond. But in the end, it was all wrapped up on Tuesday night. And it was the first time that IFA members had the option of returning their vote by post, as well as the traditional option of going along to their branch AGM and casting their ballot there. But the hybrid system does seem to have worked in IFA's favour, because there was almost 30,000 votes cast in this election, which was an increase of around 8,000 on the last election in 2019, which saw Tim Cullinan elected IFA President. So this time around, when the total valid poll of 29,905 votes was counted, it was suckler, beef and sheep farmer from County Laois, Francie Gorman, who was successful in being elected the 17th president of the IFA. He received 16,699 votes against 13,210 votes, which were cast for Martin Stapleton, a dairy farmer from Limerick, and of course the IFA National Treasurer. Very interesting to look at the map, Louise, the breakdown on the final votes and where all the votes went. I suppose Stapleton dominated in Munster, as would have been expected. I suppose he is from Limerick. But outside of the province, it was Francie Gorman who dominated, and he was victorious in every other county. Look, there was lovely images, Louise, from the count centre, and we have them on Agriland. I suppose a really main player in Francie's campaign would have been his 9-year-old son, Tom, who just was beaming with pride looking at his father taking to the podium. And of course, he was joined by his mother and Francie's wife, Kay, as well, to watch in the celebrations. And I suppose his campaign did focus around a promise to deliver for farmers and, to increase a better communication within the organisation, particularly for the grassroots, and also, I suppose, to communicate outside of farming circles about the efforts that farmers are making as well. And look, Agriland caught up with him after his election, and here is some of what he had to say.
We provide probably the single most important function that people need to live is produce good, top quality, sustainable food. And we've been unfairly criticised, I think, in some media outlets about how we're doing that and the damage that's been done to the environment. And that message that we're providing it in a sustainable way, all the measures that we've taken on our farm to deliver on that sustainability never seem to get a mention. And we produce our food in a more sustainable way than most places on the planet. So it's important that we get that message out there, that we convince the people who buy our food that that's what we're doing and that it's worth their while to support us in the challenges we face in doing that.
So that is the new IFA President, Francie Gorman, Louise. But also this week, history was made as Alice Doyle became the first woman to be elected Deputy President of the IFA. After the votes were counted, Doyle received 16,502 votes, beating off competition from Galway dairy farmer Pat Murphy, who received a total of 12,968 votes. Prior to her election, of course, Alice Doyle was the chair of the IFA National Farm, Family and Social Affairs Committee for the past 2 years. She's a native of Carlow, but she has been farming in partnership with her husband, Tom, down in County Wexford. They have a beef and tillage farm down there for over 30 years. So she's definitely an adopted Wexford person at this stage as well, but very close roots, of course, to her native Carlow as well. And look, along with farming, Alice Doyle had a background in teaching. She was a principal in numerous schools in Carlow and in Wexford as well. And she did say during her campaign that she would be using that skill set if she was successful in her election bid to, I suppose, improve the IFA and improve its offering for its members as well. And here's some of what she had to say after her historic election.
I'm very proud of the fact that I've broken the glass ceiling, but I'm also very conscious of the fact that there's a huge burden of responsibility on my shoulders now. It's been placed there by IFA members. They put a responsibility on me to work hard for them and deliver in the future. And I'm confident that I can do that in conjunction with my fellow officers going forward. I do believe that the new National Executive, in conjunction with the new President, myself, and the other executive officers, will have a good plan in place in the very near future as to where the organisation has to go and where farming is, what we have to do for farming. We've been given a very clear mandate around the country as to what has to be done. We know there's a lot of hard work and we know that it's going to take a lot of effort to do it. We're not at all fooled by the fact that we're going to work miracles, we're not. But we are going to really work hard and hopefully we will be able to say that we have unified farmers, that we have delivered for farmers.
And the presidential and deputy presidential elections were not the only ones taking place. Who are our new IFA regional chairs?
Yeah, so there was 3 regional chair positions up for grabs in this election, Louise. The first one to be confirmed at the County Centre was Munster. It was contested by Mark Connors from Waterford and Conor O'Leary from Cork Central. And it was Conor O'Leary who was successful, receiving 1,823 votes against Conor's 1,164 votes. James Gallagher from County Leitrim and Brendan Golden from Mayo contested the regional contest in Connacht. Brendan Golden, who is the IFA Livestock Committee chair, received 720 votes compared to 651 votes received by Gallagher. So Brendan was elected there. And the role of the IFA chair for South Leinster, there was a 3-way battle here between Tom Byrne of Wicklow, Pat Farrell of Kildare and Paul O'Brien from Kilkenny. And it was Paul O'Brien, who of course is the IFA Environment Committee chair, who was successful there. He received the winning number of votes with 1,442. Pat Farrell came next with 477 and Tom Byrne received 396 votes. And look, just a reminder, Louise, that there is a lot of coverage from the IFA national elections on Agriland for all of the political animals out there, including plenty of interviews with the new IFA President, the Deputy President and the 3 new regional chairs. If you want to hold them to account over the next 4 years, check those out and see what promises they're making.
Thanks, Aisling. Now just leaving the IFA election count behind this week, we also had an update from the Chief Executive of the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation, Sean Coughlin, around changes to the beef breeding index. What is the latest there?
So representatives from ICBF, including the Chief Executive Sean Coughlin, spent several hours this week before the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Agriculture, responding to concerns that we have heard raised by farmers and breed societies about the changes that have been made to the indices, which we've been discussing over the past few weeks with our beef technical specialist, Breffney O'Brien, here on the podcast. Now, the TDs and senators on the committee said they had been inundated, Louise, with calls about the changes. They spoke of the mental and financial stress caused to farmers, with many stating that the ICBF has lost the dressing room on this issue. Now, Sean Coughlin, the ICBF chief executive, did admit that communication with farmers around these changes had been suboptimal and it would be reviewed to better manage what he said was the anxiety that farmers and herd owners feel when these indicators change. Now, he did say as well that he felt that there was a bit of scaremongering going on out there, but he did say that the ICBF has written to all farmers who are in SCEP, of course, that's the Suckler Carbon Efficiency Programme this week, and it is planning further direct communications to allay the fears that are out there and to ensure that farmers have a full understanding of what these changes are. Now, ICBF, as we previously reported on Agriland, are set to establish an industry stakeholder forum early in the new year to engage with all stakeholders on the suckler beef indices. But members of the committee pointed out, Louise, that this is a case of the cart before the horse, and this forum should have been in place prior to these changes coming in, and that farmers would have been fully aware and breed societies would have been fully aware of the implications of these changes. Of course, they are the first changes made to the Eurostar indices since 2015 when it comes to beef. So they also told us that ICBF are currently engaged with the Department of Agriculture in relation to farmers who are in SCEP who will be most impacted by the index changes. Now, Coughlin said he didn't want to see a case where farmers who'd acted in good faith would be penalised, but he added that the terms and conditions of this scheme would be a matter for the department. And the committee heard that some members of the ICBF board had expressed concerns in the discussions around these changes about the impact that it could have on farmers involved in SCEP. But it was noted that all of the board were unanimous when it came to the science behind these changes. Look, as an aside to all of this, Minister Charlie McConalogue has been in the Dáil this week answering questions on this matter as well. And he said that he would make sure that farmers in SCEP do not lose out financially to these changes. So we'll have to see what he will be doing in terms of that, Louise. But back to the committee, we heard that 84% of female animals on commercial beef farms who were 4 or 5 star before these recent changes would remain in those categories. And animals that dropped in the star ratings would hold their original star rating qualification status for the duration of SCEP. And Coughlin said that currently 82% of herds have enough females present on their farms to make them eligible for the next SCEP deadline at the end of 2025. Now, he did note that ICBF would be in contact with some farmers, especially those with closed herds, in order to help them to implement a strategy that keeps them compliant with the terms and conditions of SCEP as well. Look, I suppose it was a very fraught meeting and we have a lot of coverage on it, Louise, on Agriland. He did say that if ICBF didn't implement these changes, they would be accused in 6 or 7 years' time, when we do see the effect of the changes coming into the beef herd, that they would be accused of sleepwalking the suckler farmers into breeding animals that weren't fit for purpose. So, there was calls for the ICBF to pause the implementation of these changes pending the outcome of an independent review. The committee called for that, and further consultation with farmers and breed societies. But the ICBF chief executive ruled this out. Have a listen.
The reality is that either the indexes are published or they're not published, okay? And you actually, bad and all as it is now, you create an even bigger vacuum of information if people don't know whether the indexes are going to be published or not. And then you face into a breeding season next spring where people are selling animals, or they're trying to buy animals, or they're making breeding decisions. And they don't know, they're operating in a vacuum. And what is critical at all stages is that the buyer and the seller in any transaction should know what the value of, should have the same opportunity to know what the value of a bull is, or what the value of a cow is. Okay, so we don't want a situation where we release the indexes, take them back, and then some people have the access to the indexes as they were. They know what they're going to be. They're selling on one index, and you have a commercial farmer potentially buying on another index. And that simply is a recipe for carnage, and is not what an independent evaluation unit should be doing.
That was ICBF Chief Executive Sean Coughlin. Now, this week we also had the official establishment of the long-awaited Agri-Food Regulator by Minister for Agriculture Charlie McConalogue. €2.5 million worth of funding will go towards the regulator. Aisling, what will its responsibilities be, and what is the general reaction to its establishment?
Yes, Louise. So it is a considerable budget for an office whose main aim is to ensure fairness and transparency in the food chain. The regulator is based in the Department of Agriculture's Backweston campus in Kildare, which is where the official launch took place this week. So the regulator will have price and market analysis functions, we were told, and will become the state's enforcement authority for implementing rules on unfair trading practices, the UTPs as they're known. And the newly appointed Chief Executive Officer, Niamh Lenihan, said that the work of the regulator does not extend to changing consumer prices, but they will work with business-to-business relationships in the agricultural and food supply chain. And she confirmed that the regulator will be able to make enforcements on specific UTPs, and where unfair trading practices are highlighted by the board, the CEO said there would then be an onus for them to investigate sensitive information. Now, Lenihan's work will be complemented by a board which is chaired by former IFA President Joe Healy, which is going to continue to engage with farm organisations, we were told, on what farmers need from this new regulator. And to answer your question, Louise, in terms of the initial reaction to the official launch, I think farm organisations are taking a wait-and-see approach here before casting their judgment. ICMSA President Pat McCormack said that farmers would be waiting to see if the new regulator provides the food transparency that it's tasked with doing. But it's not going to be easy for them to achieve that, it has to be said. And Pat McCormack said everyone welcomed the establishment of this office, but warned that there is a danger that the board will, in his words, stand by wringing their hands when confronted with obvious unfairness. And he said to prove that that's not the case, the board has to come out of the gates strongly and send a strong message to farmers on their ability to enforce regulations here. And the ICMSA president said that the regulator should publish monthly prices received by food producers, the processors, retailers, and any other actors on the supply chain in a way that takes into account the uniqueness of each food product. So look, we'll wait and see, Louise. It's off the ground. We've waited for a long time for the Agri-Food Regulator. We wish them well in their work. And if they succeed, it will be for the benefit of farmers. So we hope that they do.
Thanks for that, Aisling. And before we go, just a reminder that eco-scheme balancing payments of almost €82 million have commenced this week. This will bring the total paid under the 2023 eco-scheme thus far since October 31st to over €285 million, with 113,724 farmers now in receipt of a payment. Also, the approval letters to TAMS under Tranche 1 have now commenced, starting out with the Solar Capital Investment Scheme. It is expected that the majority of approvals will be issued by the end of April 2024. We have a lot more detail on those payments and more over on Agriland.ie. Before we go, I'd like to say thank you for listening to the Farming Week each week, and we would really appreciate if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars or share to anyone who you think might be interested. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. All the best for myself and Aisling for the week ahead.